We heard from a couple of speakers. We heard from Liz Winstead, who's a comedian and radio personality, and then we actually heard a musical performance from the Borealis Ensemble with the Twin Cities Gay Men's Chorus. And so, yes, this is a protest, but it does seem as though there is this sense of celebration out there as well.
Yeah, Raya, that's what we heard from one woman who decided to march to the Capitol, and she said that this almost feels just a little bit more levity than we've been seeing. What we heard from protesters is that the past couple months when we've gone to rallies or when we've gone to protests, there was this almost this feeling of dread, folks just focusing on the fact that there was a lot going on there in their community, a lot that they were upset about. But here they said it feels good to be together. Listen to what she has to say.
You know, we're still dealing with things in Minnesota, and I think it's important to acknowledge that while, you know, we're not denying that, we're just here to kind of draw attention to the positive aspects of what we want to build as a society together and have, you know, more justice and accountability and really respect for human rights. And I think a lot of the protests too, we're adhering to the rule of law, we're being peaceful, we're showing the society we want here that welcomes all people, and that is a good place for everybody to live.
Yeah, and overall what we've seen is that folks have been very, very peaceful. That is something that we have heard from organizers say time and time again, that is the focus of this event. And so far, that is what we've seen. Folks have just said that it feels good to be around other Minnesotans that share a lot of the same feelings as them. Yes, there's anger. Yes, folks are upset with what the Trump administration is doing. But right now, it feels good to be in Minnesota. Folks point to this as an example of Minnesotans showing up time and time again for their community members. That woman that we spoke with was actually someone who, over Metro Surge, there was a lot of folks that were going out and trying to protect their neighbors, make sure that neighbors had resources for them. And that is something that woman was doing. That's something that a lot of these folks were doing, just overall trying to protect their neighbors during Operation Metro Surge. And we continue to see a lot of those people want to come and support and make sure that their voices are being heard. In terms of security, we see a lot of security. St. Paul Police said that there are hundreds of folks that are here keeping their eyes on the crowd from a number of organizations. There are street closures to ensure that people are safe, and overall they didn't get much into the details or too into the details, but they said that there are a lot of folks that are just here making sure that people are safe. There's medics here as well, and overall just keeping an eye on things. But right now, things are very, very peaceful, Raya.
All right, Sammy, thank you so much for giving us a sense of what you're seeing out there and witnessing. We sure appreciate it. Again, just to remind some folks, this is being billed as the main flagship protest of all of these other protests that are also happening all across the country today. There are more than 3,000 of them scheduled in different parts of the U.S. There are also dozens of smaller protests happening in the state as well. So not only are we seeing people at the state capitol gathering from across the state, but also perhaps there is that potential of people coming in from out of the state as well, because again, this is being described as that main flagship rally by organizers. All right, we do want to check back in with a Republican strategist and former Minnesota State Senator Amy Frederickson. Amy was also the first woman to serve as Majority Leader in the Minnesota Senate. And for those who weren't able to listen to some of the conversations we've already had today, Amy, I just want to first start by getting your response and reaction to the scale of this protest that we're seeing here at the Capitol in Minnesota today.
Sure. Well, you know, it's impossible to ignore the size of this event. That there is an energy and a momentum even over rallies that we've seen, the No Kings rallies we saw last year, or in other locations. And I think it cannot be understated that this is in large part a response to what Minnesota went through in end of December, January, particularly around Metro Surge. Now, as reporters have interviewed folks, we find that there are a variety of reasons that people are joining the No Kings rally, but certainly the momentum is in large part, and the reason that Minneapolis is the epicenter or sort of ground zero for No Kings today is as a result of what went on in Minnesota during Metro Surge.
And I do want to ask you, we had talked a little bit about, the upcoming midterms in our last conversation. You had said there is still some time, perhaps, for, the Republican Party to turn the ship, as you said. So what does that look like from here until November, Amy, in your opinion?
Well, it's really incumbent on both parties. So for the Republicans, I think that it's important to recognize what is on, as always, well, with both parties, you need to recognize what's on the mind of, everyday, normal Minnesotans. And that can be hard. It can kind of get lost in the political rhetoric. And oftentimes politicians are surrounded by activists on both sides of the aisle. And it can be, it's kind of the squeaky wheel theory where they sort of get caught in a bubble of, well, this is what everybody cares about, and that's not necessarily what all of Minnesota electorate cares about. And so Republicans have to be mindful of that, but not just when it comes to the conversation around Metro Surge, but the conversation around the economy. This is typically an off election year from the presidential race. The party in power, which will be the Republicans, typically loses seats. And right now, besides Metro Surge, besides what's going on with Iran, the economy is still very struggling. People are still hurting. And so they need to be mindful of that. For Democrats, they need to not overestimate what the public in general, not activists, but the public in general is thinking about the situation. I think there is momentum and energy because I think that Minnesotans in general, Republicans and Democrats, did not like what they saw in the way of constitutional issues, businesses shut down, 3,000 ICE agents on Minnesota streets across the state, by the way, not just Minneapolis and St. Paul, Wilmer, Austin, across the state. But not making that into something that people don't support. And I'll use an example. After the death of George Floyd, there was a sort of this surge around in protest around what we saw, what we witnessed on camera with law enforcement. But that evolved then into really violence. In the streets of Minneapolis, lighting a police station on fire, and then really a movement that went to defund the police, which was absolutely not where most Minnesotans were, but it gained energy as a result of that, and then it sort of, it caused it sort of drew in everyday Democrat politicians that had to sort of respond to a really vocal portion of their base. And so, that can happen as well. And that's something for the DFL party to be mindful of as we move into the election.
Well, let me ask you this, because we have seen some divisions within the Republican Party based on what we saw with Operation Metro Surge. Some folks supporting that, some speaking out against it. Do you see those divisions diminishing between now and the midterms in order to, show a bit more of a united front? Or what do you foresee happening in that sense?
Sure. Look, I think it's actually incumbent on people, particularly when your own party is doing something that you don't agree with, to speak up. It's very difficult, but it's really important that you do. And so, I'm a constitutional conservative. That's what I grew up in. I grew up that, the less government is better. Government intervention is to be to be mindful of that, and that our constitutional rights trump everything, and no matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House. It doesn't matter to me. Whether it's overreach on executive orders, whether it's overreach when it comes to any kind of enforcement policy. And so that doesn't change for me. But I will also be mindful of, that, what is the Democrat message on this, and taking and just in general, do I agree with them on a variety of issues, right? I can have severe disagreements on this, but I can also appreciate an approach, a fiscal approach, or, other things. And so when it comes to any Republican voting, they're going to kind of weigh those things out when they get to the polls and where things are at in November, not necessarily in March, and make some decisions. Generally, as an election nears, you sort of see both parties kind of close ranks behind their candidates, unless they're completely and wholly unacceptable.
Seeing that this is an election year, we heard from one of our crews on the ground saying that they've heard some of these organizers and speakers today sort of trying to mobilize folks to get out there and vote. So I am wondering, with these sort of events and demonstrations, do you think they can serve as a way for maybe, as a constructive outlet for Democratic participation, or do you think that they perhaps could deepen some of the political divides that we do see across the country right now?
Well, any protest generally serves as some sort of, like, I'm not going to be shocked that there's politics in our politics. So of course there is that. But, and also what is being said, the rhetoric being used can be problematic.